All right, Ella, thank you for taking the time to come on to the Next Step Espresso podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's good to be here. It's my first live streamed one, so let's see how this goes.
Yeah, it's live stream, so don't say fuck or bugger for people that know that reference. Tell us a bit about who you are, Ella. Who are you? What do you do? Why should we care? Give
Well,
us your
yeah, why should
spiel.
you care? Great
Why
question.
should we? Come on.
All right, so I'm Ella. I am a lecturer in psychology. I also work with lots of fitness coaches, and my whole aim is to bridge the gap because we know that, okay, it's not just calories and macros, right? It's not just knowing the training. It's that other piece. It's the why can't I do it? Why can't I stick to it? What's wrong with me? What's going on? What are my barriers? So I love that side of things. That's kind of my expertise. My journey here, I did my undergrad in psychology. I then went off and trained in sport nutrition, all this nerdy stuff, the mechanisms and all this stuff. I can't even remember any of it now, as you can tell. I'm just making stuff up.
Yeah,
But
that's what I do.
yeah, exactly. But getting into all the stuff about all these different hormones or whatever the hell it is, right? And then actually working with clients and realizing that, wow, this is the simple bit. We all know what we need to do. We can Google it. You need to kind of be in a calorie deficit, and we probably want to have more movement in our life. Very, very simple. The issue was that people find that really, really hard. And so that's what sparked this journey of the real question that I'm interested in is why can some people change and other people can't? What's going on there? And can we explore that space?
Yeah, well, that's the space that season 2 of Next Step Espresso is exploring. That messy middle between long-term change, body composition change, limiting factors in terms of genetics and predispositions and all of that jazz. So welcome. It's great to have you. It's great to, I love that phrase, bridge that gap, between what the science says and then the psychology aspect and the science psychology, and then working with humans and the messiness that brings in terms of, people's lives, values, environments, genetics, and everything in between.
100%. And sometimes we can almost think of ourselves as a human as the main barrier. It's like, if only I was different, if only I could do this, then everything would be fine. And so we almost wish that we always put our own self aside to try to get to the outcome. But actually embracing that and realizing that we aren't working with robots. We aren't robots. We are a human. We have a human experience and condition. And so therefore, that's the only perspective that we should be taking or that's useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting that, because I think there's a piece about behavior change of having a change in identity, in terms of your identity is very key to your values and therefore the behaviors and the habits that you have on a day-to-day basis. But also, you can't change who you are in terms of your genetics and your parenthood and that. So it's like, where does that combination lie of accepting our lot in life versus wanting to make a change?
Yeah, where does it? This is a super, super important question. I love this question. It's very it is the question. That is the exact question. I think something that I've been exploring a lot recently is that what people do, so exactly what you're talking about, do we accept ourselves or do we think that we can change and try and change? I think it's a combination of both, which sounds like such an obvious answer, but it's about people's experience. And what I mean by that is, if somebody has an experience of I don't really like eating vegetables, right? That's their experience. That's the truthful experience. That is who they are. They've got two options now. They either pretend that's not their experience and try to force themselves through that. And they're like, but I have to like vegetables. So therefore I'm going to ignore my actual experience and then try to eat the vegetables, right? That's one option. But then the other option is to accept, do you know what? I'm a person and I realize that I don't like vegetables. It's probably not, it doesn't make any logical sense. I feel like that's a bit silly because I'm an adult, but that's the truth. And so by working with this truth, that's the only real way forward. And so I think one of the true issues that we have when trying to change our behavior is not about, should I accept myself or should I change myself? It's that, are you actually changing the right parts and are you actually accepting the right parts?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Lean into that a bit more for me. So it's
Okay.
that kind of narrative of like, yeah, okay, I don't like vegetables, and therefore it's not about finding vegetables I enjoy or a new way of cooking them or a new recipe. I need to lean into maybe making a health focused change that isn't eating more vegetables and is something else.
It's like, if you hate running,
Yeah.
that might not be the place that you need to make the change. But luckily
Yes.
there are other things that you can be doing that's going to be more helpful. And there are
Right.
some things that was only really one non-negotiable, and that's a calorie deficit. Other than that, everything else is up for grabs, right?
Sure.
Whether you do that with vegetables, without vegetables, with running, without running, there's so much stuff that's open there. So that's the kind of bit I'm getting at, which is that oftentimes the reason why it's not working is we're trying to force it, or we're trying to act as though we're different to how we actually are. Change can happen, but it has to happen from where you already are. So it's no point being like, if I was somebody that was motivated all the time, then I'd be great at this and I would be able to do it. But you're not that person. So, but you're a different person who's equally valid. So let's go from that.
I find that belief system is important to those sorts of things as well, though, Ella, right? Because like, based on Fitspiration, which is one of my like least favorite content out there, this whole like motivation, want it more, you know, I'm able to do this. We've all got 24 hours in a day. Look at me, you know, like I'm mid-20s, I'm genetically gifted. I live inside of a gym and therefore can do sort of squats and curls in between having a poo. Versus like, you're not actually going to be motivated all the time to change, because that doesn't exist. And motivation is an interesting thing that can have internal connection and external connection. And also it's like action comes before motivation. You know, if we value making a change, or we are embracing an identity that we are a health seeking person and therefore value that, we are going to act in line with our values, whether we're motivated or not. It's like, I think belief is so important there, of like, oh, I'm just not motivated, so I'm not going to do it, versus, well,
belief is super important. But there's another piece to it as well, right? Which is that there are some people, inspiration, whatever you want to call it, right? It leads to one kind of person, or it tells you there's one way to be able to be in this space, which is that you got to put it above everything else. You got to be super committed. You got to ignore your own internal cues. You want to be in a place where, you know, you want to get shredded. It's got to feel hard. It's got to feel challenging. You got to be more sexy, more confident, right? So that's the kind of person at the other end of it that you would need to be. But that's only ever going to be a subset of the population. So it's never going to be like, if you've got the average person who's struggling as it is and is yo-yoed, that's because that's not their identity and that's not who they are going to be. So there has to be another path for those people, something else that's actually realistic and something that they can actually aspire to, that's going to fit in their lifestyle. And that's a challenge.
Definitely. Yeah. And what you said about, okay, if you don't like running, then running's not the change for you. Like, that's the piece, isn't it? It's the case of like, don't look at someone else and what they're doing and say, well, I want great health and fitness results, but I hate, you know, exercise, or I hate running, or I hate lifting weights. It's like, well, there's another form of movement that you are going to enjoy.
Yeah.
And genuinely, you don't know what you don't know. Like, I chat to a lot of clients who say like, I had a bad experience doing X and therefore I'm hesitant to try it again. Whereas it's a case of, well, maybe it was done in the wrong way, or, you know, you went too hard, you did the wrong kind of methodology, you tried too much too soon, and that gave you a negative, you know, feeling. And it's funny how when you actually have that conversation and break it down, they're like, I'm willing to try it this way. And then they do that and start to develop a love for something that they previously hated, like running, for example. Never was a massive fan, but as I developed a better aerobic ability through the gym, and then developed a better technique for running and understood the concept of pacing and intervals and taking breaks, it was something that I developed more of a liking to and actually got okay at. So it's just interesting, that approach as well.
Yeah, it's extremely nuanced topic. So we might think, you know, you're healthy or you're unhealthy, but that's not a thing. What that is a dynamic process that is all the behaviors that add up to being a healthy or an unhealthy identity. Same with any identity. An identity isn't a fixed thing. An identity is a label for moving parts, essentially, right? So if somebody has struggled with this stuff for a really, really long time, of course their identity is going to be that they are not healthy, or they don't like these things, because that's true. That's why they are like that, because they don't like those things and they're not doing those things. But that's always going to be the way, unless they can shift their identity and their behaviors change. So it's that weird thing of, they are going to have to be different to their current self to see success, because their current self isn't the self that they want to stay as. But then we have to understand that people can only make the changes, the ones that are almost intrinsically valuable to them. So it's this really fine line of trying things that are slightly outside of yourself versus picking stuff that's already within yourself. Because if it was already within you, you'd already be doing it. So it's really fine line.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if it was, yeah, it is. And I think people often, compassion is a key one, because people often berate themselves for not doing enough or doing things sooner, or any one of those things, whereas actually it's, as you said, it's that nuance of like, okay, I need to make a shift maybe in my identity and my belief system, but how do I do that in a way that I enjoy, and start in a way that's maintainable, so that I can start to build some long-term behavior change. I mean, one thing I wanted to specifically ask you about is there's a weird narrative around that diets don't work, and long-term weight loss isn't possible, long-term change isn't possible. And I'm not saying people say, why care, or why bother, but there is definitely a narrative in the whole, let's focus on behaviors from a health perspective rather than a weight perspective, because that yo-yo is there because of certain programs promising you a solution but being quite restrictive in nature, there being quite a high rebound rate from said programs, and therefore it's like, well, you can improve your health without that, so let's change the focal point. And you mentioned earlier the only non-negotiable is a calorie deficit, and I guess this is for people who are looking to lose body fat in, because you wouldn't need that if you were maintaining. But then there's a narrative that's like, well, even intentionally creating a deficit could be seen as a restriction. There's the rebound that could happen in terms of increased hunger and lowered satiety because of said deficit. And will that rebound long term? What are your thoughts?
So I think a question as important as this shouldn't be down to a personal opinion. It's based on what the research says. And as we kind of mentioned before we started, the research does seem to suggest that for the majority of people, it's very challenging to lose weight. It's okay to lose weight. The problem is losing more than 10% of your body weight, and the problem is keeping it off. The odds are, according to the literature, stacked against you. But so many caveats, like we spoke about earlier. We don't know what diets they're talking about. Is it the way that the typical approach, which might be super restrictive and cutting out certain foods and thinking that you have to, go keto or this or that? So we can't really tell from that. We don't know what that would look like for other different interventions. And the other part of it is almost like, is that really helpful? Because of course, your belief, or we would call it in the research, self-efficacy, your opinion about whether you're going to be able to achieve it or not is a huge predictor on whether you achieve it or not. So that's playing into it as well, right? So how helpful is this research? If you read the research and you believe that you can't change, then you're not going to be able to change, because that's going to lead to your subsequent behaviors. So it's about usefulness. But what I would say, right, is that, okay, say focusing on a deficit may not lead to a successful outcome in terms of weight loss, and it may lead to rebound. But the real thing is that, so those behaviors, though, are they worthwhile doing anyway? If they're not going to lead to the outcome, and the research says that body weight won't go down, is it still worth engaging in those behaviors? And the answer is absolutely yes, because there's this massive misconception that slimmer is healthier. That's not what's happened. That's we conflate findings. That's not true. It's because people who are maybe slimmer or in a smaller body, it also goes hand in hand with being people who exercise more or eat less or who go through periods of restriction, right? So those are the things that lead to the health outcomes. So you can have those in a bigger body. So you can still be healthy and all that kind of stuff in a bigger body. So there's a lot of information in there. I don't know which bit you want to...
Oh, Ella, it was perfect, and I could see there's beads of sweat upon your face as I asked you the question of like, this can't be down to personal opinion. And I appreciate you saying that as a disclaimer and saying, let's look at the research, because that's what we have. And I think that's the important, crossover, is this is what the research says and what we have. We need to understand the strengths and drawbacks and limitations of any form of research because of sample size, studies done, what methods, all the rest of it, and then also look at our individual experiences working with different people and our own personal beliefs and combine that to our opinion rather than say
Mhm.
this is definitely this is definitely the case.
Mm.
And I think that's why I wanted to release season 2 of this podcast, because I've been too guilty in the past of being like, hey, I'm doing these nutrition certifications and this is the crack, this is the golden these are the golden nuggets, this is what the science says. And then almost too far the other way through intuitive eating of being like, none of this works. stop, and I just had to kind of like, I had to look at it all and go, Johnny, what do you believe? What knowledge do you have, and how can you actually make this useful information?
Yeah.
And what you said there, I think, is one of the key points. What diets have actually been studied? Because I was looking at, quite a lot of references just before we jumped on this call, and was looking at like, yeah, okay, we've got diets that are named diets or restrictive approaches, and there's quite a heavy rebound weight there, and there's quite a lot of disordered eating and eating disorder symptomatology that come from that. However, when we look at behavioral interventions and ACT based interventions, there seems to be better results in terms of intentional fat loss and also in terms of weight maintenance.
Yeah.
I know that health at every size is possible, as you just mentioned there. Like, you can be healthier in a bigger body because of the behaviors that you do, both in terms of movement, sleep, eating, and all the rest of it. And are those behaviors still worthwhile doing, even if the long-term result isn't possible?
And this is like,
100%
it goes
yes.
full circle, because that
Yeah.
point, if you inherently believe that there's value in those behaviors, regardless of the outcome,
Yeah.
you're more likely to get to the outcome. And that is that
Yes.
is the absolute thing. This is like, as you're saying there, you said it, the important word is intentional weight loss.
Yeah.
Intentional weight loss is very hard to lead to actual weight loss. But what isn't as hard is finding real value in the actual behaviors. And those behaviors just happen to be linked to weight loss. And so therefore that's how you get to it. And the reason why that works is because that's intrinsic motivation, and that comes from identity. So it seems like, how can just a semantic point make a difference? It makes all the difference. And this brings us on to, I think, ACT. And the link that I've just made is that if you believe that nothing works, then what's the point of anything, right? If you don't
Yes. Yeah.
believe you
Yeah.
can lose weight, it's a nihilistic view. If you believe there's no point to life, why bother engaging in life, right? That's nihilistic. So it's not helpful. There's no help in that. So we have to think like, what we're really talking about is how can we live a meaningful life? Because if there's no point to it all, any of this, we want it to be meaningful. And that's where ACT comes in, because ACT is very much focused on living a meaningful life.
Yes. And I love that, because like I'm big into mindset and identity and that belief system of, as you said, if you believe it's not possible, then you're not going to bother. Like, it just doesn't seem, that's just not a truck I can get on board with.
Mhm.
And mindset around that you can argue that there's a privilege in terms of a certain someone's ability. Absolutely. We've even said genetics and all the rest of it play a huge amount in what results someone might get. However, having the belief that something is possible will lead you to take action in certain ways that you wouldn't do if you didn't believe it. So
Yeah.
tell us a bit about ACT, because you've mentioned it a few times, and obviously we've not actually defined that yet on air.
Mhm.
Tell us a bit about that. And
Yep.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So technically, ACT is what we would call a third wave CBT. So what that really means is that it's not focused on necessarily the validity of your thoughts and finding evidence for it, and it's not just focused on like classical conditioning and all that behavioral stuff. It's a third wave, which means it also takes into consideration like mindfulness based stuff. But ultimately, the whole purpose of ACT is that life is difficult. Life is suffering, and to be a human, we have to experience the whole human experience, which is the whole range of emotions. And issues arise when we actually try to shut off certain parts of the human experience, and we're only open to some, and we're not accepting and open to others. So at the heart of ACT, what we're really trying to do is increase psychological flexibility, because someone who's psychologically flexible can navigate life in a way that is meaningful. So it's all about doing what matters to you to make your life rich and meaningful. It's not about avoiding pain and suffering. It's not about, is this thought correct? What's the evidence for that belief? It's that, what is your relationship to your thoughts? If you're so connected to them and they're hooking you in, then that's the problem, regardless of whether they are true or false or whatever. So that's a massive whistle stop tour of what it is. Yeah.
No, it was brilliant, because a lot of what I heard there is experiencing the plethora of human emotions that we go through,
Mhm.
understanding that life is messy, suffering, emotional, and we need to not shut ourselves off from negative emotions and thoughts, but embrace them just like we do with the positive ones. And then also take action in line with what is meaningful to us as a human being. So I guess
Mhm.
that's where personal values come in.
Absolutely. So there's kind of two main purposes of ACT. Firstly, identifying, knowing what's important and being able to know what direction to take. That's the first part. But then the other part of it is the kind of acceptance part, which is the willingness or the psychological skills to be able to be present and to do that kind of stuff. So there are what they call the hexaflex, which are 6 key components. So if ACT is all about having psychological flexibility, there are 6 things that demonstrate whether you or not you have psychological flexibility. So the first one is acceptance. So that's really having a willingness to go through life and experience all of the experiences. Not that when something stressful comes up, you're like, oh, no, that's not, I don't want that one. It's having the acceptance of all of them. The next one is diffusion. So this is the idea of if you're fused to your thoughts and to your experiences, it's almost like I'm going to do it here. But if so, you've got your thoughts and feelings in your hand like this, and to be fused to them would mean they're here. So you're looking through them all the time. It's affecting how you navigate life. It's affecting everything. Whereas the idea is that we bring it here. We're not getting rid of them. We're just moving it out of the way of our face so that we can engage in what's important. So that's the diffusion piece. Next one's present. We spend most of the time not present, not in our bodies. So we have no idea what we actually want, need, think, and feel. So it's about being present. It's about understanding that we are a self as a context. And what that means is understanding that we aren't the thoughts and we aren't the sadness. We are the one that witnesses it. And we are the context for which that all occurs, which is a bit philosophical, but that's part of it. And then there's 2 more, which is values and committed action. So those are the 6 things that make up psychological flexibility that you might work on in ACT.
And I love that because it's so much deeper than, hey, follow this, food plan or track these calories and do my weight program and you'll get, all of your dreams come true. It's actually a case of like, right, well, what's important to me as a person in terms of my values? What do I think is important? How do I diffuse myself from my thoughts and feelings, as you mentioned there, in terms of know that they don't define me, they're not true, they come and go like the weather, and how do I still take action in line with my values and accept my thoughts and feelings as a human without letting them run my life?
100%, because even deeper than that, anything that's worth having and has any meaning to us, there are going to be lots of uncomfortable sensations, thoughts, and feelings that arise. And so we can spend our whole life trying to avoid those sensations, and we're never going to do what's really meaningful, or we have to embrace them and we have to learn skills to help us. So it's that if we truly want to be a healthy person, that's going to come up so many challenging experiences, which we need to have the tools to manage. Another side of it as well, though, is that it helps us to realize that a lot of the time people are engaging in health and fitness behaviors through the idea of what we would call experiential avoidance, which is that you're doing it to avoid a negative feeling inside. So I hate the way my belly jiggles, or I exercise because if I don't, I feel like a loser, or if I eat healthy, otherwise I feel gross about myself. Yeah. So you're doing it to actually avoid uncomfortable emotions. That would be experiential avoidance. Whereas what we really want is we want people to be moving towards what they value, doing something they actually value rather than avoiding what they don't like.
That's a really cool point, Ella, to be fair, because like, as someone who has some experience in marketing and copywriting, there's a big thing of like pain points, lean into the pain. And actually, then people find themselves acting out of line with their values, as you just said there, because they're doing things to almost punish themselves or to avoid a certain pain point rather than doing something because it makes them feel good and it's acting in line with their important, what they feel is important.
Absolutely. And it's not saying that that's not motivating. Some people will spend their entire life being motivated like that. But it's also thinking that, is that how you want to live your life? Do you want to spend your whole life feeling bad and doing things because you feel bad and you're not enough as you are? Or would you actually like to have a rich, meaningful life that you do things that you want to do?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I want to pull back on your point about doing hard things because it's one of those where I feel, and this might, might get a backlash, I don't know, but it's one of those where I feel like sometimes there's a bit of a sort of fight against doing hard things in like, oh, you know, that's just going to be not pleasurable, and you know, what's the point? You know, you could just live this way and it's going to be more fun or whatever. Whereas if it's like okay, I value being healthy and fit, and I realize then that I want to be active and, you know, eat more healthful foods, that's going to provide a bit of discomfort because I'm changing my behaviors. But
Mhm.
it's like preparing for exams or getting a, you know, a better job or getting a different degree or whatever. Like, you're doing hard things, but it's
Mhm.
because you value the outcome on the other side of it. And there's people can't tell you whether that's right or wrong because it's whether it's important to you. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
It makes complete sense. And there's nothing wrong with somebody wanting to go through their life in comfort. But what we do when we try and avoid the uncomfortable feelings is that we also don't let in as much of the really great experiences. So you will experience less joy, you will experience less awe, you will experience less of that as well, because it's almost like acceptance and being open to your experience. It almost makes your experience extremely expansive. So if we imagine it like I don't know, a pipe, that the more open you are to experiences, your pipe gets bigger, so you can just let in all these different experiences, and you're going to have a mixture in there, but you can feel the full quality of life. The more we shut off certain bits, we think, oh great, I just won't do anything that's too hard because that's really, really uncomfortable, and I won't do that, and I won't do that. We think that means that we can still get all the good stuff, but you don't. You're muting your whole experience. You can't have
Mm,
day without night. You can't have struggles. You can't have the happiness without the struggles. It's just the challenging part about human nature.
that's the yin and yang philosophy, though, isn't it?
Mm.
That you have to have both to be whole.
Yeah, that's
There's the balance.
my philosophy, I suppose. That's more. I mean, it's not groundbreaking. People will see that, but I think we don't live like that. Like, people can understand that intuitively, but we don't live like that. If that makes sense.
Well, I think one of the most important things you said on the podcast so far, Ella, was before when you were like, we don't live inside of ourselves a lot of the time. We don't actually, you know, we're not present with our thoughts, feelings, emotions, values, and actions. We just live on autopilot.
Mm.
And that's the biggest thing I work on with my clients, which is why there's you know, which is why it is hard work. Like, it's not a case of getting this meal plan or getting this set of calorie targets or getting, you know, this specific exercise plan per se. Although I do provide exercise, but it is very individualized. It's a case of that constant thought process for the client of, how do I want to act today?
Mm.
And I know that I'm trying to eat more fruits and vegetables and eat more balanced meals and pay attention to my hunger and appetite, but I'm also trying to diffuse from my thoughts and feelings so that I don't just mindlessly snack, because that's not who I want to be. And it's like, it's embracing that road of like, yeah, this is going to be hard because this is like learning how to drive a car, but for
Mm.
your entire body. And remember how fucking difficult it was to learn how to drive a car,
Yeah.
but how beneficial that now is because you can drive yourself anywhere. It's like, this is
Yeah.
what I'm asking you to do, but with your food and exercise decisions.
I don't disagree, but I would probably frame it a slightly different way.
No,
Um,
please do.
so that's how it feels for people. It feels like this is a really challenging cognitive task, because through the whole day I have to keep being mindful and I have to keep making the right decision, and that leads to decision fatigue, and I've got to have enough willpower and I've got to have self-control. So that that's because we're thinking of it through a cognitive lens. I think it's not that they have to keep thinking about the right decision. It's that they are getting in touch with what they actually want to do. Now, they don't
Yeah.
think that's what they actually want to do, because they think that what they actually want to do is to have the chocolate, say. So they think that what they're doing is having to make a decision. No, I don't want the chocolate. But it's not that. What they're actually doing is they're actually realizing that what they truly want, what's at the true essence of them, is to do something
Mhm.
different. And that's different because what we're saying is it's already inside them. All
Mhm.
And the reason I know that's the case, or the reason why I feel that's the case, and they're not only the person that just wants the chocolate, is because why do they keep coming back to this idea of wanting to be healthy and wanting to lose weight? Okay, it might be societal pressures. My argument would be because within them they feel that that's truly who they are, or within them they feel that that's really their true self and their true identity. And so they don't feel
Mm.
good when we're not being who we really are. So rather than going through the day having to cognitively think about what do I want? What do I want? It's that the more stillness we can bring, the more we allow for wisdom to enter. And then that's when you realize what you really want. It's when we are back in our body, when we are still, that it's not a thought process. It becomes so clear. Does that make sense? It sounds like the same thing, but it's very, very different.
No, it's the importance of semantics, as you said before, of like the reframe is really key, and why language is key as well, as you know, the relationship with food makes such a difference, you know, like viewing food as good versus bad versus like, you know, foods that you see on a spectrum, and allow yourself based on sort of values and thoughts, and that piece, yeah, like you're actually there's a deeper being that you're like, I want to live in this certain way that's kind of dying to get out. So the more stillness you can bring, the more you'll allow
Yes.
that to be expressed.
Yes. And actually, all the other stuff is the coping and the avoidance of your true essence. We'll use a spiritual term. It's the avoidance of your true essence. And that's why you don't feel good in yourself, because you're not living out your true essence that's underneath it all. That's my perspective on it. And I think that's the way that people change. I think the way that people change is to realize that's who they already are. It's like it already is your identity. You're just not living in alignment with it. And as soon as you live in alignment with who you actually are, that's very different to thinking I need to change who I am.
Yes, yeah, it is, and that's a great mindset shift. Interesting, because you know I've been reading a lot of stuff around like mindset and paradigm and identity, and that idea of, as you just said there, if you live in accordance to who you actually are, it's going to feel easier than trying to force it.
Yes.
But it's accepting that is who you already are. It's like it's a weird
exactly.
Like,
and this is
why now.
And this is why I really don't like the fit inspiration stuff, because what it's doing is what everybody wants you to do is they want you to adopt other identities than to who you really are. And what my argument is, what I truly believe, is that you already have all the tools inside you. The issue is you're not able to be fully authentic. And I truly believe that once we create the conditions and people start living more authentically, everything snaps into place. The problem with that is like, how do you turn that into practical tools that actually helps people? But I think that's my philosophy under the heart of it. It's that, you know, you got two types of people. Maybe those that have never really been into movement or never really ate in a healthy way, and then you got the ones that did but have now strayed from it, and so for them it'll be all about feeling how they used to feel when they were younger, because that's how they truly see themselves or how they truly experience themselves, and they don't recognize the person they're being right now.
And I guess my question would be, bringing that stillness to someone, is that a case of applying more mindfulness-based strategies to just practice being still more regularly to allow these thoughts or behaviors to start to come to the surface? As you said there, like the harder thing is actually breaking it down into strategies that people can use. But I think that's definitely something I embraced when I started my mindfulness journey through Headspace, was that kind of like Buddhist philosophy of stillness as being the key, you know, of like you really do have to just sink into that doing nothing to allow your brain to process stuff.
That's the biggest thing. And also what I would say is, when people are out, maybe they're out in nature, maybe they're playing with their kids, maybe they are engaging in the thing that they love. Do you know what they're not thinking about? They're not thinking about how they need to lose weight and how they're incomplete until they lose weight, because everybody can be perfectly content and okay as they are. That everybody has access to that resource in them. It's that we have these thoughts that crop up, and we have these beliefs about ourselves, and we have the pressures of the world, and we have everything imposing on us, imposing upon our inner well-being, if that kind of makes sense. And so, yes, it's about stillness, but also I think people already know what it is that they really want. And it's also the thing that keeps coming up, right? What's the thing that that person has like mentioned year after year or week after week, or, okay, all week they may not behave in a way that suggests that they want to be healthy, but they keep saying that they want to. So it's somewhere, isn't it? It's in there somewhere.
Yeah, because, you know, there is a piece of like people's actions will show you their priorities, but that's an interesting piece that you've just said there of like, actually, if they keep bringing it up, it is important to them. There might just be a blocker of like how, or they've found themselves in a scenario where they've got into certain habits and routines that they're now actually realizing aren't serving who they truly want to be. And it's just that messy, it's just that messy intention of trying to take action now that's in line with this other thought,
Exactly.
rather than
And
just
I
living the
think
status quo.
that's one of like the biggest myths. I can understand that, and it's really popular in the self-help space, which is, show me how a person spends their week and I'll tell you what's important to them, or like all that kind of basically the stuff you just said, right?
Yeah.
And I get it, I get what they're saying, but the biggest, I guess, myth there is that we do things that are important to us, or the biggest myth is that we act in a way that aligns with what we actually want. We don't do that at all. There are so many impacts on behavior that isn't our own volition. It outweighs all the stuff. Like, how free are we truly to do what it is that we want to do? Not very. Like, we've got messages from the minute that we wake up, we have jobs, we have people around us that we need to care for, we've got beliefs, we have the way we were brought up, attachment styles. Like, so it's just, to me, that's not necessarily the case.
No, I agree. And I completely agree, because I found that one of the most disempowering messages that I had in one of my other coaching programs was when it was the lifestyle coaching module of like, people will show you their priorities through the way they act. And I was like, well, what the hell is the point in having a health and fitness coach? Like, surely we're trying to help them change that, or at least, live more in line with their values, because they found themselves not doing. And I mean, we mentioned earlier about this whole look, you can be healthy because health is a case of behaviors rather than a size. There might be some pain points being driven by societal norms or fitspiration that is making you start a health and fitness change, but it definitely won't help you continue a health and fitness change. And so you mentioned internal motivation,
Mm-hmm.
and that would obviously be part of that sort of self-determination theory.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question would be, how do we develop and build that internal motivation for health-based behaviors when we've got such a pronounced talk that's like, you must look this way in order to be happy and healthy?
Yeah, good question. So what the research would say is that there are, so as you know, self-determination theory is, it's not that there's intrinsic and extrinsic. There's a continuum of quality of motivation that goes from a motivation all the way through to intrinsic, but there are varying degrees. And actually, it's all about whether our motivation feels controlled, so to please others, to avoid punishment, to not feel bad about ourselves, or whether it's autonomous, so we do it because it's who we are, because we enjoy it, because we want to, because it's part of the goals we want to achieve, right? And so what the research would say is to move from worse quality motivation to better quality motivation, we just need to fulfill 3 basic psychological needs. That's competency, autonomy, and relatedness. And so the idea is that as a kid, you are intrinsically motivated. You're running around, you're skipping, you're living your best life. Then what happens is you get to school and you realize that you're rubbish at skipping, because Sam next to you is great at skipping and he can like still this kind of other skipping. So you learn that you're not really that competent at skipping. So suddenly it goes from being something that you enjoy to now that need's been thwarted and you're not good at it anymore, so you don't do it. And so the way that we try to build these behaviors is, firstly, we have to make the person feel competent. So we know that people who are trying to engage in these behaviors have really, really low self-belief because they've got loads of evidence that they can't do it. So we need to help them build evidence that they can do it. Well, okay, but you go for a walk every day. So you are doing it. You've made these great choices. So you've got to make it easy enough at the start to get somebody involved in. And it also has to be challenging enough. The autonomy part is that they have to feel like it's self-selected. They have to feel like they have a choice over this. They have to feel like they're the ones that want to do it. The biggest issue in the fitness industry is that most people are doing it for other reasons than they want to do it. They think that they want to do it, but when you ask them, okay, what is it that you want to achieve, or why do you want to achieve this? I just have to lose weight. I need to. I just should be exercising more. So every single one of those are a controlled form, and it's more extrinsic. So absolutely none of those are intrinsic reasons. So we have to help people to feel as though they have a choice. Like, well, you don't have to. You don't need to. You literally could not do any of this. It doesn't matter. It's fine. But would you like to? And like, which ones would you like to do? And the last one is relatedness, which is that we have to feel as though we're connected to others. We have to feel like we matter. We have to feel like what we're doing kind of matters. And that's where a coach is great, because the coach comes in there as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's it's just such a powerful reframe again of like reframing why you're doing things, and then things are going to be one, more fun, one, easier to stick to, and three, bring you better results.
Mm.
Like if we circled back to something you said before, it's funny how intentional fat loss seems to get people stuck because it's like that's what they're focusing on. That's the metric of success.
Mm.
And we have this data to suggest that diets don't work and long-term change isn't possible beyond kind of 10% of their body weight.
Mhm.
However, we see good results with people that we work with when the focus is more on the behaviors and the aspects of their health that are within their control rather than focusing endlessly on the uncontrollable, which is how their body changes.
Yeah.
So it's like if you force your body to make a change every week, if you force yourself to take progress photos and, whip yourself if things aren't going and try harder, slash calories, do keto or anything else that just makes you wake up every morning and say that you hate your life, well, those things aren't going to last, are they? Whereas actually, when you take the focus away from the uncontrollable and focus on how am I living my life? Am I
Mm.
enjoying it? And am I doing health based behaviors that align with my values? You see good results from a physical perspective.
Yeah. And even if you don't, you're going to feel way better.
Exactly, because that's the point, isn't it? The point is that you
Yeah.
feel better, you live better, you enjoy your life better, and you
Yeah.
are healthier because health is, determined from your blood work rather than
Exactly.
your body size.
If you come to a coach, like if a client comes to you, right, and they're like, I feel really uncomfortable in my body, I don't have much confidence, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to lose weight, and also
Mm.
they're super, super stressed and stuff. Well, if they start dancing and they fall in love with dancing, they meet loads of dancing friends, and now they feel super confident in their body, they feel sexy as well, they feel really competent. Wow, my body can do these things that I never thought it could do, but they haven't dropped down a size. Well, but everything else has been solved. Everything that they were struggling with before has been solved. Their now life is have so much more meaning. It's more rich. So it almost doesn't matter. But I know people. It does matter to people, but it doesn't matter as much when everything else is okay.
I think it's discovering deep down what that change looks like,
Yeah.
because we're told that this happiness and this acceptance will only happen if we are smaller. Whereas actually, as you just said, you refined dance that you did as a kid, and now you have a group of mates who all dance, and you shop and find dance clothes that fit you and make you feel sexy, and you're now doing a health-based activity in the evenings that makes you, more happy and regulate your emotions better, and everything is solved. And it's cool that, like, it's why I did musical theatre again, because it was something that was taken away that was unsuccessful as a career, but actually refining it as a hobby
Mm.
has, like, it just adds so much of, I help clients find their hobbies that they used to do because it does have that aspect, and
Yeah.
movement can be a side benefit. I did a post about that recently where someone said to me about my former self, oh, you were in the shape of your life back at this point. And I was like, well, at that time I was also rigidly, counting my macros. I would wake up and pinch rolls of body fat. I would body check constantly. I'd weigh myself. I would judge myself based on the scales. I would look at pictures and say horrible things about myself if the lighting wasn't right or I wasn't, I would tense in every photo. And it was like, I don't do any of that now.
No.
So was I really in
Yeah.
the shape of my life?
It's super powerful, isn't it? Two things. There are some things that weight loss can do. There's loads that it can't do. And it's understanding that health or size, whatever size, is one component in life. There's so many other components. And oftentimes, exactly like you said, people who are in great shape will still be sad. They'll still be lonely. They'll still be stressed. They'll still be bored. They still will feel inadequate. And sometimes they'll even feel those things to a greater degree. They might have more body focus, like you were saying, because as much as we want it to be the case, there is not a relationship between body size and well-being as far as I'm aware, like psychological well-being. And I think there is some research in terms of at a certain point of obesity, it impacts upon well-being. But as far as I'm aware, there's not. I'd have to double check, but there's not like, yeah. Well, what I do know for sure is that you don't remove uncomfortable and negative experiences once you achieve a body size. That doesn't go
No,
away.
no. And as you were mentioning at the very beginning of the show, associations with health-based behaviors, and therefore the improvement of health, people are smaller, but it's because they've got health-based behaviors. It's that piece, isn't it? It's like health is a set of behaviors as opposed to a set size, and whatever size you are, you want to be doing a set of behaviors that are health-based, rather than thinking, I can't change my shape, so what's the point in doing any of these things? Because it's not about that. It's actually about doing things that align with health, but that also align with what you want and what you value.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely.
Great. Well, that's a fantastic place to end. Ella, where can people find more about you and the great work that you do in the space?
Appreciate that. Just Instagram at the fitness psych _ psych spelled PSYCH. That's the best place. Check out me there.
Yeah, and you've got a podcast as well that
I do have a podcast. It's called the Fitness Psych Podcast. We talk about this kind of stuff. It's on a hiatus at the moment.
That's fine. It's important to have breaks, I think, and then reevaluate and bring out new seasons when you have the energy to, as I did sort of with this. So I'll link those there. Final question. It is the Next Step Espresso podcast. Are you a coffee fan?
I am.
How do you drink it?
Cappuccino.
I'll take that.
Why? What was that? What was I supposed to say?
No, it's fine. My parents ran their own business when we were growing up, and we used to do a lot of weekend trade shows. And they did a lot in France, funnily enough. And when they did that, they had a sort of team of French people who were friends with my parents who would help out. And the French always used to take the mick out of my dad because he would order a cappuccino, and they called it the woman's coffee. Funnily enough, this is back in the 90s and early 2000s. So I'm not sexist, disclaimer. So that just made me laugh. I drink it black, but that is purely because I like the taste of good coffee. Although I do make a terrible mocha, as you'll see on my stories. The
I've
mocha
just
art is never good.
that coffee is so hit and miss that you're usually safe with a cappuccino. Like sometimes you can ask for a cortado and it's too strong, or a flat white. So I just go down the middle. Cappuccino, safest bet.
The knowledge of coffee in this country isn't good. It depends on where you go. And that's why I do miss London for its places of good coffee shops. Although Leeds have a couple who I trust, and I've got my own espresso machine, so I make sure I buy the beans from places where I trust, because I'm a bit of a snob that way. I remember being in a Costa and someone saying to the guy, "Can I have a large flat white?" And they were like, "No, because the flat white comes in a single size." The person did not understand.
Well, no matter, shout out to Small Batch Coffee in Brighton. They to me are the best in the country, as well as 4 boroughs in Crystal Palace. There you go.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, two great places. Cool. Well, Ella, thank you for your time. It's been wonderful chatting with you today, and I hope you have a great day.
Andrew, pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.